Hey everyone, this is Karnak with Star Wars Armada Explained. Today I have another interview, this time with someone who placed 8th at Worlds. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been playing and what got you into Armada?
Sure. My name's Mack. My actual name is Mackenzie Dell, and I just go by Mack because it's a lot easier. To tell you a bit about myself, I've been playing Armada since the day it was released. I love the game, and I think that the thing that really got me into Armada was the fact that it was a mixed bag game. And what I mean by that is the fact that it's squadrons, ships, upgrades, the whole package. I've played everything from X-Wing, where you get your individual ships that you get to upgrade, to the Axis and Allies games where you'd have single units. And this is one of the few kinds of games where you're able to kind of intermingle everything. And so I've been playing it since way back in the day. Since day one, I guess, and it's just been a great game since then.
Yeah, I started Armada myself just a few years ago, and I love it. It's my first miniatures game, and I don't feel like I could have picked anything better.
Fair enough, yeah.
So for your world's experience, let's talk about your fleet list. Now you placed eighth with a what's a lot of people consider something that's very unique. Although I guess in Canada by this point it's not unique, but it totally caught me flat-footed because you beat the crap out of me with it.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a weird list. I guess to delve into it, it's was originally an attempt to make something that was attempting to be unkillable. And just to quickly recap the list for if anyone cares or hasn't looked at it, it was just an ISD and then a Gladiator that was specifically not demolished. They were both Seventh Fleet, so the whole goal was to not die. Uh, and the whole concept there was, like I was saying, to not die. And it looks so janky, and I think that was my favorite part about it, was
Will
how it
concur.
didn't
It
run.
looks
Pardon?
really janky.
Yeah, well, the fact that it doesn't have demo on it, it's not running any of the key upgrades, stuff like that. I don't know. Do you have any specific questions about it? Do you want me to delve into it?
So I mean, one of the interesting things I thought when you put because obviously I was lame. I was running two ship. And I saw you put that across the table for me, and I was just like, I don't understand what this is. And just like with two ship, if you're not familiar with a fleet list about how you're supposed to beat it, you will lose against it. And I absolutely lost against it. I lost. I got U10 won me. I mean that, and that's not to say that that doesn't take away from anything you as a player. Because if you guys watch, it's my round 7 video, you will see Mack also plays extremely well, like really well. You made no mistakes from what I could observe. And so your fleet list, why did you hit upon the seventh fleet? I know you said you wanted to make a fleet that was unkillable. What brought you to this point?
For sure, yeah. And once again, thanks for the compliment. It was a good game, and I think a lot of it came down to just a critical point in the match. But as far as the list goes, and why Seventh Fleet is um how do I say, not that I was doing the math or anything, but I came to the conclusion that every single defensive upgrade you can take kind of gets you to 1 point. And when I say that, I mean like your Brunsons, your Major Derlins, your Landos, things like that. And then your defensive techs like ECM and repairing gets you to 1 point. And that point keeps you alive for most of the game, but you need to be able to go that one step above it. So, for example, like interdictor targeting scramblers or something like that. But I found I always ran out of points because, without squadrons, you tend to get bombed to death and you die. So by doing the Seventh Fleet ISD, you have your Brunson, you have your ECM, you have all your defensive kit, plus you have an 11 health package with all your shields, and then you have the Seventh Fleet for that little bit extra, which just keeps you alive, as well as the Projection Expert's Gladiator, which is pretty much like an interdictor, but a heck of a lot cheaper, which allows you the 134 of squadrons, so you can still play the squadron war. And so to kind of to break it down really quickly, it's all because of Thrawn. Because you can essentially make your ISD do everything, you can build a one ship list, which is kind of the two ship list idea, where you have your ISD kind of do everything. You do your Quasar first,
Right.
last. Exactly, yeah. But by having it all contained into one ship, you can have your other ship essentially just piss off and not participate and fortress points a lot better. And I'm probably going to answer some of the follow up questions you have for this, but I think that's the big difference between like the world's caliber play is my list is a little gimmicky in that regard, where if you don't know anything about it, like you're saying, when I play across from you, you didn't know how to deal with it. You'll probably try and kill that ISD, because if you kill my ISD, you win the game. It's as simple as that. It's 200
Right.
point monstrosity, exactly, and then you win, and that's that. But if you don't get any points because everything is contained in that one package, and the Gladiator just screws off. And so the players who beat me, like Tokra, the fellow who won Worlds, they don't fight the ISD, and that's the game because they win through other means. They get points through other means, squadron wars, things like that. And so it's kind of one of those taking advantage of people who don't know the list, the kind of the surprise gimmick, because they go all in on the ISD. You can't kill it, and then I get my points that way.
I definitely can concur. Once I had heard about how Dennis had beat you, is that he essentially just came in, sniped off some squadrons, and didn't go all in because he knew, as you mentioned, you're just so tanky. You just go for what you can get, and then you just bounce out. And that sounds like that's what he did to you.
Yeah, and I mean to break down our game in the short version of it, he didn't fire a single shot at the ISD. I think maybe the Quasar fired a side shot for giggles because he wanted to roll some dice because his dice were hot garbage. I mean, honestly, he deserved to get way more points against me than he did. It was a really derpy game where I kind of went all in on this one situation. My goal was to kill Jendon and prevent his relay chain. I failed to kill Jendon, and thus my gimmick kind of failed there, and he was able to win the squadron war. But for some reason, it took him 6 turns to kill the Gladiator, when it should not have taken him 6 turns to kill the Gladiator. His dice were hot garbage.
Man,
But yeah, no, he played it really well.
and that's Armada, baby. It's still a
Yeah.
random dice game.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the things to the skill of Toker. He's really good at kiting with his list, and I apologize. I don't actually know what his real name is. I just keep hearing the form. I think
Dennis.
it's Dennis. Yeah, okay,
Yes.
Dennis, perfect. Yeah, to the skill of Dennis, he was very good at kiting, and he was able to see the nonsense kind of out the gate. And I don't know if it's because other people had talked about the list, other people had played it. I know, for example, Norm ended up copying it. I don't know, and I'm not trying to discredit him or anything like that. It's just one of those things where I'm curious how he figured it out, or if he just knew better, but he didn't engage at all, and he just kited me, and he got his points.
I think large of it is that he's a national champion. Several years he's been to Worlds. This is his third year. A lot of it is just experience. Like with all things, the more you practice, the more you play. Ultimately, the better you're going to be overall.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
So, I mean, how long did it take you to develop this list, though?
It's That's a weird question because it depends on what you're talking about by developing the list. So to give a little bit more backstory into we'll call it the creation of the list or whatever you want to say. I'm not sure if people are aware, but I'm part of the Team Canada group. I play in Toronto a lot. And myself, Norm, Yick, we were all practicing and kind of testing ideas well before Worlds just for our own Canadian regionals and our own things like that. And we've kind of our group came across this. I'm going to call it a conclusion. It's not fact. I mean, every meta is different. Everyone has their own conclusions. I'm not trying to step on anyone, but that you need to have arguably 130 plus points of squads, as well as some sort of fortress or containment for pushing your squads and making sure you're not tabled, etc. Yick is famous for he was a runner-up in Worlds last year. He does his Riken Aces. In Canada, as far as we're concerned, he's the Riken Aces guy. My list is the kind of contained in the ISD, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we would do is we would build these kind of fortress packages. So it would either be like an interdictor and a ruthless strategist Kuat or some other kind of heavy box and a big dumpster of squadrons. But this was the only build that I could come up with where you wouldn't lose a big piece of it. Like, for example, in the Thrawn 2 ship, you'd lose the Quasar. In the Interdictor Kuat, you'd lose the Kuat. In the Riken Aces, you tend to lose the Riken Pickle. And so, win or lose, if you lost that container or that squad pusher, you kind of lose the game. And when I say lose the game, you don't actually lose, but at Worlds, if you're getting a 7 or less, it's a loss. Like, you need to get several 8s if you're going to, make top table. And so that was the only way we could figure out to save the points is to have a 2-ship list or a bunch of MSU garbage where you don't care if you lose a couple hammerheads or something. But yeah, so I don't know if that answered the question at all.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Very good insight. That's the kind of stuff I love to hear because every meta is different. My meta
Every
is
meta,
not your meta. And same thing with Europeans and UK. It's just fantastic to see all these different mindsets.
For sure, yeah.
So and it's great is your list is placing 8th. Let's talk about top 2.
For sure.
And I know anyone who's watched my interview with Dennis and my other interviews we've already kind of have mentioned already about how just for me personally when I saw the ship set up on the table I'm like I don't see any large ships.
Yeah.
Like what is this? Oh my gosh, I don't see Yavaris. I don't see like all these
other he had a Raider and an Architan, right?
Yeah, it's just I see an Archidans on the table. Like, what is this? What kind of world's this? And it was Center Core and which nothing makes me happier to see an Archidans and Center Core on the table for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Oh, go ahead.
My final point was just I was just so excited to see Dennis bring something so drastically different than I think we've ever really seen at Worlds before.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the secret to his success. Is it's a threefold thing. One, I mean, obviously he's a fantastic player, skill, skill, skill. I'm not
Oh
not
yeah,
taking anything away from that. But two, I think a big one was a meta call and taking advantage of weird toys that you don't often see. And so what I mean by meta call, he was really smart in his judgment of list types. So if you like break it down to list archetypes, there's a lot of lists that could beat Dennis's that are a lot of all in kind of, I don't want to call them nonsense lists, but lists that you didn't see at Worlds because they kind of just get crushed by everything else. So he made a really good meta call and he built a list that beats Thrawn 2 ship. It does really well in the heavy squadron meta, but it can still fight the all ship and get the points you need to get from objectives and whatnot.
yeah.
And then, like I said, skill.
Yes, absolutely. Even Dennis himself admitted that his list can't go toe to toe, with a Star Destroyer or anything. That he even said that his goal wasn't to kill large ships unless the other player was flying recklessly. It was to
Mm-hmm.
pick off all the other pieces to get the solid eights or the sometimes nines. He wasn't going for a tabling.
Yeah, and his counter picking or meta reading is phenomenal there, just because also in the fine detail. And so what I mean by that is his activation numbers, his squad numbers. So he was really good in his ability to get maximum activations without including a large ship. So he had his two flotillas, his Arcaten, his Quasar, and his Raider. So he's able to sit at 5, which tends to be the magic number. It's you can't really get past 5 and still run squadrons unless you're running, I don't know, like 4 hammerheads and 2 flotillas or something like that. It's
Right.
so hard to get everything in. But he was able, pardon me, to get his 5 activations, but still have the 134, which is really, really key. So he can out activate those Riken players, he can out activate those 4 ship, those 2 ship, and just get complete squadron control because he's able to essentially not last first, but wait till you've done everything and then do a full squadron salvo because either you can do it through the Arcatan or if you're an all ship, you can run away and send them in piecemeal. And that's a really, really good meta call. But if he was to fight one of those kind of janky lists, and I don't want to say it's a bad list, but let's just say that kind of like mashing of 2 ISDs and some TIE fighters that just kind of flies in and tries to kill everything, that list is going to get tabled by the majority of the Riken Aces, the Thrawn 2 ships, all your meta
Yep.
lists. But he would really struggle with that.
I can concur with that. Another thing that made his list like really hard to engage too is the fact that if you go like for center core, well, his squadrons are still getting pushed by the Quasar. If you go after the
Yep.
Quasar, it's still getting pushed by the Arcadans. Like you don't really you can't win.
Yeah, and he did a better job from player skill than I did in doing a similar strategy of being defensive. Just to break down our game a little bit more, I made the choice of trying to go in and get points because I was down going into it, and I was hoping to win the whole thing. So I wanted to try and go for that 8+, even though I knew he
Go
was a
big or go
fantastic
home.
player. Exactly right, win or go home. And so, whereas against a lot of my other opponents, I would play very cagey and wait for them to come to me. And his list is really good at that because if I, like I did, I extended my fighters a little bit and he was able to first turn hit me and kill my stuff. Whereas had I put my squadron to the back of my ISD, built a little flak bubble and just kind of waited, his stuff's pretty fragile and his ships don't have any guns. And so if you choose not to play with him and just really, really, really sit, he doesn't have that ship kind of core, that punch to go in there outside of his squadrons. And so if you're going to baby your squadrons and leave them in the back of the bus to defend yourself so that you don't give up those points, he will really, really struggle to get them. But once again, it's a fantastic meta call. It's a world's mentality where he knows everyone's going for the throat and nobody's going to just sit there with their thumb up their butt waiting for you to make a decision. And that's kind of the counter to that defensive fortressy list like I was running, like he was running, is to sit there with your thumb up your butt and wait for them to make a mistake. But nobody did.
And I can absolutely agree with that. Something that someone pointed out to me was that Dennis essentially played second a lot. He didn't really play
Yeah,
first
100%.
because a lot of people who had the big bids like, oh, I want to go first because first is good. He loved that because it just meant that even if he chose not to engage, he's still going to get the win compared to the first player who's pressured into coming after him.
Yeah, and to break that down a little bit too, just I'm gonna roll with a first turn kind of a gimmick mechanic and how Toger's list is so good at it. Let's say you did the bail or the price. You invested all these points on some kind of last first mechanic where you all in and crush something. It could be a BT Avenger, it could be an Alpha Strike Quasar, whatever the heck it is. He deploys smart in these kind of packages. So you go all in, Let's say best case scenario, you kill the Quasar, or best case scenario, you kill the Arc-10. You've blown your entire gimmick, your entire list in killing essentially a fifth of his list. Well, I guess less than or more than a fifth. Depends on how you look at the squads, but one of his 5 ship packages, and then he counterattacks you, and you've blown your entire load to kill a lucky if it's an 80-point ship.
Yeah, and as you said, he knew his list. He knew what he could give up, what he didn't need to give up, and as you mentioned, he just knew it. And it's just
Yep.
it's just high level play, and it's just
It's
fantastic to
high
see
level
that.
play and some great calls. And I mean, obviously, there's a bit of luck. His dice were crap against me. Maybe they were good against other players. I don't really know. It could have been matchups. There's always luck, and that's Armada, right?
That's Armada. That's why we
But yeah,
play it.
yeah, the
That's why
whole
we love
Trinity
it. So moving on to,
for
of
sure.
course, for Worlds, we've seen Squadrons at Worlds in the top finals every single list. Some players are starting to get concerned that they feel like Squadrons are starting to be detrimental to Armada. Other players feel that it's just part of the game. You just need to accept it. Kind of, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like there should be any changes, or should it stay how it
Sure.
is?
In short, I think squadrons are fine where they are, and I think it's an important part of the game. But to go into the long answer of it, when Armada was first created, I had spoken to Gurnas for a bit. I used to work for FFG as like an intern way back in the day, playtesting, as well as other folks. And the consensus of Armada originally, I mean, this is a long time ago. Things have changed, obviously, and none of this is super relevant. Was that it was supposed to be a combined arms game. If you wanted to play squadrons, you could play X-Wing. If you wanted to play, ground, Imperial Assault was coming out at the time, things like that. It was supposed to be this mix of you have your squadrons, you have your capital ships, you have your Rebel Navy, you have your Imperial Navy, you have the whole thing. And it wasn't supposed to be just capital ships. And in the beginning, it was kind of weird because if you look at the first Gen Con and the early worlds, it was just dominated by these all ship lists. So they pushed out a lot of upgrades to try and help the squadrons. And now, as people are saying, it's kind of dominated by the squadrons. But it's such an integral part of the game. If you were to remove or nerf or do things to squadrons, it'd be like removing objectives or removing something else. And yes, it would change the game and it may make it more fun for more players because it'd be shorter, more high impact, more dice. And I'm not saying that it's more or less fun or anything like that, but the game is built around that trinity. You have your capital ships, you have your squadrons, and then you have your play. And what I mean by play is your objectives, like how you are playing the game.
Right.
And so the game was built around that. And if you were to remove or hemorrhage on that section of the game would change as a whole, which may be good, may be bad. But I love the game, and thus I don't want it to change for any reason.
I can vastly concur with that. I think squadrons, I think ultimately are fine. I personally feel like there probably could be some quality of life adjustments made to them, but ultimately, I feel like we need like an Armada 2.0? No, I just think that FFG understands that there's changes that potentially need to be made, and I'm really confident they have a plan. They understand it, and I think that they're already working internally to address that, however that may come about.
For sure. And that's actually where one of my big concerns lies, and not from FFG, but from they want to make a game people like. And so if people keep asking for squadron nerfs or things like that, it'll come, and that's fine. It's a very delicate balance because there's only 2 ways in the game to kill squadrons. One, you shoot them with other squadrons, which we can't really get into that because if you're nerfing squadrons, you're also nerfing the anti-squadron squadrons, and that whole package is removed. So I'm going to talk about the other way of killing squadrons, which I'm sure you all kind of got this. It's AA or flak or however one you want to call it. And that's a very, very touchy scale because if you think about it, flak it can range from garbage does nothing to absolutely decimating, and it's just the finest line. Like you could have a ship with one flak that does nothing, or all of a sudden you have a demolisher with callus and flechette torpedoes, and all of a sudden it
Yep.
can shut down an entire wave, something like that. And one upgrade can just tip the scale. So if you think, man, Yavaris is really annoying and Yavaris is bad, you kind of have learned. We've all learned to play against Yavaris. It's happened. We've all been beat up by it once or twice, just like Demolisher, things like that. But if you have an upgrade, say, the upgrade that gives you counter 1 on your ship, but instead now it's you throw 5 dice at squadrons. I don't know, something ridiculous. All of a sudden, squadrons they're kind of garbage because you're able to kill them with this one upgrade, or you have this combination that just wipes squadrons off the board. And
Or
I'm
just
really
stiff
scared
arm
about that.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you remove them, it becomes this really weird silver bullet scenario where it's rock paper scissors. Is, oh, I didn't bring any squads, so you spent all these points on anti-squadron upgrades, and you didn't bring any squads, but I win because I went more all ship than you did. And then it's, oh, you spent your points on anti-squadron upgrades, and I brought all these squads that you're now going to nullify, so you beat me, and it's a really derpy rock, paper, scissors, skill doesn't matter as much. Whereas right now, the kind of assumption is you have to bring some squads or something to deal with those squads, and if you don't, you fight a squadron list, you'll get tanked. Just like looking at the stats, I don't know if any all, but I feel like you need to have squadron. It just has to be part of your list if you want to do well.
Yeah, Troops' list made 5th, and it was all ship.
Oh, truth. Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. And that's an exception. Thank you for quoting me on that. He's a fantastic player, and he's good because, or his list is decent because at least it has some anti-squad tech in it, like his slicer tools and things like that.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
very rarely all ship lists make high just because they fight one bomber and they get 10-1 if they don't have the tools to deal with it.
That's correct, and I can absolutely agree with that. And at that point's been brought up before, is like your plan just can't be, oh, I'll just kill the carrier and win. It needs to have way many more steps to it than just that.
Yeah. Especially if you fight something like Toker's list, where he has that token raider who just mails in the orders. It's, oh, you can't table me. Thanks for coming.
So moving on then to the new content. I think this really transitions well. Talking about how the squadrons and obviously the new content coming out. We've got Clone Wars, which is freaking amazing. I think that's going to bring in so many players. We've got the new SSD is finally arriving, quote unquote.
Yeah.
The Rebellion in the Rim, and just all the. I can't wait to have them spoil more cards for that, because obviously we got the sneak peek at the 2 squadron cards, but we know rogues and villains are all getting new squadron cards. We know that there's a ship title coming out for every ship, and again, 12 new objectives. Like, holy crap, I can't even begin to imagine how that's going to shake up the meta.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I could go all day about it. We could, shoot our opinions and whatnot, but I have no idea how it's going to be until it hits the table. Like a great example was RLB or Rapid Launch Base. I remember when they got first spoiled, everyone was like, "Oh my God, these are the greatest cards ever!" Or "Oh, this is the worst!" Or "How do we interpret it?" And there was a billion and one different ways of playing the card. And everyone was so worried about it and getting a rules calling on it. And the next major tournament that they came, there was nobody running it. It just didn't matter.
Right, because nobody
Yeah.
wanted to take that risk, which I get.
Well, nobody wanted to take the risk. Nobody really knew how to do it. It was just everyone was so worried about it breaking the game, and it didn't even matter. Like the same thing happened with Constantine. There was people crying cheese on Constantine when he was spoiled. And I don't think I've seen Constantine on the table in like a year.
Constantine is bad.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Where like I right now I want to cry cheese on Lando. I think his ability is really, really good, and there's been people kind of arguing on how the wording works, like if you're allowed to scatter his modified dice, because does scatter count as modifying dice?
Yes, it does. So technically, you can.
Yeah, and I mean,
dice.
Yeah, it's a weird one because word is written. You could definitely say it rolls one way, but I mean, let's just look at Sloan and how that whole thing went. I don't even want to get into the rules debate there, but it could be amazing and ruin the game. It could also just be a perfectly normal card that isn't a big deal. So,
well, I think a good counterpoint to that ability is, he's got to discard a brace token in order to do it. So, I mean, you're sacrificing defense for offense, but I mean, if you can do a first strike capability where that just utterly decimates your opponent and he can't respond, I can agree with that. How can you respond to something that just is going to kill you?
for sure. And I mean, once again, I don't know if you really want to get into an argument, and I'm not trying to say you're right or you're wrong or anything like that, but a great example is I like to compare Lando to Bossk. So they're the same price, but Lando's just kind of arguably better. I ran
Yeah,
Bossk.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, Bossk only has one brace token. I still love him to death. Bossk only gets his accuracy if if he's hurt, whereas Lando just says, "Oh, I got the accuracy now." And Rebels have so many toys to kind of compensate for Lando's, "Oh, darn, I spent my tokens." For example, Riken, we all know how that goes, or you can just jam through it, things like that. So I really don't think his spending of the brace is that bad. And worst case scenario too, let's say you've burned both your braces and you've had a huge impact on the game, you're still a 23-point fat rogue. Like you're a sweet chip even without those braces.
Well, another thing too, if you're running Lando and you're not bringing Jan, you're making a mistake, because Jan can help cover for him using his defense tokens.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, he's got 7 hull, and I mean, Rebels have escorts. There's just so many things to compensate for this, what I like to consider a minor weakness. And I mean, there's going to be people who disagree with me. It's just opinions, right?
Absolutely. And the other, I mean, IG88, I mean, he sounds cool on paper, I guess. I don't know. I wasn't terribly too excited about him. From what I've heard through the grapevine, though, the apparently the new unique for fire sprays and YV666 is supposed to be pretty interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see it, and I'm curious to see how it all, because it's so funny from my earlier days in Armada. everything I thought was good was trash. Everything that was trash turned out to be good. Like I thought slave turrets were going to be the greatest thing ever because more dice for cheap. And I thought TRC was garbage because, like you said, spending your tokens, right? And boy, was I wrong. So I have no idea. He might be the next Mauler. He might be the next, I don't know, corn. Actually, people use corn. Ketsu. And ironically enough, though, Ketsu was in Coda's list. Every time we say something's bad, it shows up. Like Coda won Worlds last year with Hera, and I don't think anyone has seen Hera forever. So everything has a place.
Everything has a place, and it all comes back to you take something that you know is going to work with your list. What you
Yeah.
build that for. If you build a list that isn't going to play to the strengths of what you take, you're not going to do as well as you think.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Like that's the reason I love Armada, and I was talking about the whole combined arms game. If you break down ships, you can say, you know what, this ship isn't great, or this squadron isn't great. It's not very cost effective, or it doesn't do its job right. But there's just so many times when things come up. Like a great example is the Skirk. It's always been seen as kind of a meh ship. I mean, Grit's a meh ability. But Bossk won me a game, hands down. He killed an ISD because my opponent forgot I had Grit, and he
Yep.
forgot Grit's amazing, and boom, killed an ISD. And it's one of those just like those little upgrades. They just win you a game. Or like Ketsu's weird ability. I think I've seen it used twice, and it's made a massive difference. So yeah, everything's got a place eventually. Well, I think everything. There's probably like 5 cards that don't.
There's one ship. It's called the Victory Class Star Destroyer.
Whoa, 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 whoa. As Team Canada loves the victories, and especially just a shout out to Christian, who's been running victories since the beginning of the time until the end of time. I love victories, and I think they are an amazing ship, sir.
Yeah, in terms of my play style, I don't do very well with them, and I know there are other players who, like you mentioned, it all comes down to how you play. And in terms of my play style, I just suck with VSDs.
Yeah, and they're a weird ship, and there's very specific builds. It's just like Nebulons. Nebulons are kind of meh, but I mean, Yavaris is really good.
So, I mean, by this point, 6 months from now, there's just going to be so much new content released that the entire meta is going to be completely changed. What we're discussing now in terms of what's good is not going to, it may not even be good by the time that it comes out anyway. So, we'll
Yeah.
see.
Well, and that's the thing I find so interesting because I mean, this is probably a very unpopular opinion, but I think Armada's in a really good place right now.
Absolutely, yes.
It's so balanced, it's fair. If you look at Worlds, like everyone and their mom was running a different list. Yes, there was a lot of Thrawn 2 ship, but everyone had their own kind of identity on it. There was some Riken Aces, but there was no clones. Everything was great and interesting. And as much as I love new content because it'll make the game super fun and super exciting, there'll be a lot of topsy-turviness or, unawares as to how strong things are because maybe there was some stuff missed in testing or there's a misprint or a rules interpretation. And it'll kind of throw the game upside down, which is fun and exciting, but we're going to have some balance issues probably.
And I can agree with that. I mean, look at the fact that we've been in Wave 7 for like almost 2 years or year and a half now, and the fact that the game consistently is evolving and changing based on the fact that we haven't had new content, I just think that speaks really well to the balance of the game. And I know I don't have any concerns about the game going to the future because to me personally, it just seems like if they've kept it going as good as it has been for this long, I don't see how anything in the future is going to really mess it up. But maybe just give them time, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean they're decent at fixing some problems. Obviously, you can't make everybody happy. Like some people
True.
wanted Riken to be this way, some people wanted Riken to be that way. Flotillas, Reimer, etc., etc., etc. And it's just it's a tough one because you need new content, or you're going to lose players, you're going to lose interest. You need to make the game fun and exciting, but you need to make the game fun and exciting and not break it at the same time, right? So
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I trust the playtesters and developers are proceeding forward with good intent and knowing that because they love the game too, they don't want to break it either. So, is
yeah.
there any shout outs that you want to give, or is there any other topics you want to touch on?
I think the only real shout out I want to say is to the people that I practiced with. Nick Brown's a big one. The Team Canada folks, Norm, all the guys that I love to play Armada with. I really can. I mean, this is my experience. Coda's probably a great example of his own experience. I love the team aspect of Armada and playing against your friends and the people you train against. And without them, I would be running the same thing that I was running 3 years ago. That's hot garbage because the only way to get better is to get beat up by people. When you lose to the best, you become the best. And it's like I was absolutely trash at this game, and I thought I was a big fish. And then I came out to Toronto and got spanked a couple hundred times and got a little bit better at the game. So just a big one out for them.
That's amazing. And to kind of piggyback on your comment, when I started 2 years ago, I got beat by everybody. But now my local meta, I guess, is afraid of me now. But it's like to me, I still feel like there's still so much more I have to learn. And it's just great, like you said, when you can go as friends and beat up on each other, and all you do is just make each other better, like some fucking anime.
Yeah, right. It's so cliche, but I love it, and I mean, it's weird because I love the third party softwares as well, like Tabletop Simulator or Vassal. And I know they're not really encouraging purchase of the game, which is great for encouraging the community in the game. But being able to play with people around the world whenever you need to, it's so awesome.
Vassal is honestly because I live 3 hours away from the closest person who plays, so Vassal is the only way I can play most time.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. So I actually recently moved to Vancouver. So I'm 1,000,000,001 miles away from everyone I was talking about. And even this was before Worlds. Like I flew to Worlds from Vancouver. The only way I can play is through. I personally like Tabletop Simulator more than Vassal, but teach their own. I'm not going to say one's better or worse. But yeah, it's the only way sometimes.
Yeah, I can agree with that. They both have pros and cons, and it just really just comes down to preference. A lot of people prefer Vassal because it's free, but Tabletop Simulator is also just it's so much prettier.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones where I wish more people would give TTS a try because if TTS had the community that Vassal had, that would be amazing. And I think that's the one pro to Vassal that I will 100% concede is everyone's playing on Vassal. I think TTS is better, but oh man, if we could get that Vassal community on TTS, that would be magical.
Yeah, just convince them to release it for free.
Yeah. And my argument to that is if you play Armada, I'm sure you've spent more than the whole $10 that TTS tends to be.
That's a very fair point.
Or you bought a computer to use Vassal, so you've already paid.
Very good points. I do own both, and it's just usually easier for me to find games on Vassal than
Yeah, I'm garbage on Vassal. I don't know what it is. Like I'll play on Vassal every once in a blue moon, and I'll just get stomped. And then I'll play the same mashup in TTS and crush people, and I just don't get it.
well. It's just a great way to play against the community, especially not only local people, but just players from all over the world. And if you really, to our listeners, if you really want to improve your game and get better, like honestly, jump into these online communities because you're gonna get, yeah, probably gonna get stomped, but you're also gonna learn so much more.
It's great. Yeah, they're great. I can't say
But
enough for them.
Mac, I really appreciate you coming on, doing this interview. Thank you again so much, and
Yeah, no problem.
we'll get this wrapped up. And to my to listeners, viewers, thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate it, and like always, I'll catch you guys next time.